This is Cullens Lake in northern Victoria, a drought refuge for water birds near Cullen. Australian water birds have no fixed breeding season. They are opportunists, breeding when the conditions are right. This usually happens after floods, when there's plenty of food for their young. They may then breed 2 or 3 times in quick succession. The main breeding areas are the floodplains of the Murray, Murrumbidgee and Darling rivers in eastern Australia. But when drought comes, the birds are forced to move in great numbers to the deeper, more permanent swamps and lakes further south. Cullens Lake is one of them. Once the drought is over, most of these birds will fly back to the inland rivers and begin to breed. Cullens Lake is part of the once famous Cullen Wetlands and is only about 1 kilometre from the Cullen marshes. It's all public land owned by the people of Victoria and covers about 615 hectares. The years from 1973 to 1975 were very wet years, with widespread flooding of the inland rivers and a huge breeding of water birds. As the inland began to dry out in 1976, large numbers of ducks began to move to some of the more permanent waters further south. The scenes in this film were taken from 1976 to 1978 to record the importance of Cullens Lake as a drought refuge and functioning wetland. This lake has a special appeal to the hard-head duck, sometimes known as the white-eyed duck. It's a diving duck that prefers deep water. The edges of the lake provide a good feeding habitat for waders, especially black-winged stilts. These birds sometimes gather on the lake in large numbers. Among the other birds which use the lake are crested grebes, hoary-headed grebes, mountain duck, black swans, coots, and grey teal. There are also pelicans and seagulls, even though the lake is more than 300 kilometres from the sea. Cullens Lake is able to provide enough food for large numbers of birds over many months. More than 500,000 hardhead duck have been recorded feeding on the lake. On a windy day like this, the choppy conditions make it difficult to see the numbers of birds that are there. In calmer conditions, under threatening skies, we get a much better idea of the number on the surface and along the shoreline. On another day, under different conditions again, various species were seen resting around the edges of the lake. To be able to support all these birds, the lake must produce great quantities of suitable food. This mountain duck is coming to the edge to feed in the shallows, and you can see how much food there is. By dragging an axe through the water for a short distance, we collected some of the main plant growth on which the birds feed. Most of it was closely related to sea tassel and sago pondweed. The mountain duck is curious about what's going on. Water quality is also important to sustain the high rate of food production. Some birds, such as swans, need deep water with a good food supply when they molt. In this way they will be safe from predators and have plenty of food while they're flightless. Cullens Lake provides all these conditions. Because of the obvious value of the lake for water birds, and because it's public land, you might think that the future of Cullens Lake was guaranteed. But this is not so. At the time this film was being made, the State Water Commission was proposing to turn the lake into a disposal basin for saline water. This was because water in nearby Lake Charm was being affected by salty drainage water from irrigation, and the lake was becoming salty. The Commission proposed to drain this salty water into Cullens Lake for evaporation. The Water Commission had already cut Cullens Lake off from the natural flooding which filled the lake. This regular flooding carried away the salt water which accumulated in the lake as a result of natural evaporation. The long-term effect of the Commission's plan means that Cullens Lake will gradually become saltier and the ecology change until the area is sterile and saturated with salt. Cullens Lake is also facing danger from another direction. Drainage water from irrigated land beside the lake is carrying salts down the slope, killing the trees on part of the east side. The dead trees and salty water are both real threats to the future of this lake. Part of the reasoning behind the Water Commission's plan to turn Cullens Lake into a salt basin is that, as the land is public land, they can take it off the people of Victoria without having to pay compensation. They see the land as having no value. If they use private land, they must pay compensation. But who can say that this lake has no value for water birds? And just how do you put a value on such a place? Wetlands are amongst the richest habitat types we have, but they've all suffered massive destruction since European settlement in Australia. So the wetlands that remain are very important. As a drought refuge for water birds, Cullens Lake is valuable not only to Victoria, but the whole of Australia. It's owned by you and me, the whole community. We must protect it and make sure that the Water Commission is not allowed to use it as a salt basin. We must insist that the lake is returned to its natural flooding pattern and that it's given an allocation of good quality water so that it continues to serve its vital role as a drought refuge for our bird life. Cullens Lake is an important part of Australia's natural heritage. We must all make sure it's conserved for this and future generations.